It was a typical morning at Fort Sentinel Command Center, one of the most renowned military hubs in the United States. Senior military leaders, including General Henry Caldwell, were gathered for a critical strategy session. The atmosphere was intense, filled with a sense of urgency as they analyzed the latest intelligence, discussed upcoming operations, and reviewed mission logistics. But everything changed the moment the door opened, and the last person they expected to see walked in: former President Donald Trump. Trump's entrance immediately shifted the energy in the room. There was no fanfare, no media present, just a powerful figure walking into the heart of military leadership. General Caldwell, a seasoned commander known for his tactical brilliance, stood up to greet him. But Trump waved him off. He wasn't there for pleasantries. "I didn't come here for a handshake or a photo op," Trump said, his voice cutting through the room. "I came here to talk about leadership. Real leadership." The generals exchanged curious glances, unsure of what to expect. But Trump was already pacing around the room, his presence commanding attention. "Leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room or making grand speeches," Trump continued. "It's about making the tough decisions, taking risks when others won't, and most importantly, inspiring the people who follow you to believe in the mission. If they don't believe, they won't fight. And if they won't fight, you've already lost." General Caldwell, known for his quiet but decisive leadership, felt the weight of Trump's words. He had spent decades in the military, honing his skills and leading soldiers through countless challenges. But there was something about Trump's message that struck him in a new way. Trump turned to face the generals, his eyes scanning the room. "You want to win wars? You need soldiers who will march into the unknown, knowing they'll come out the other side because they trust the person leading them. They have to know you're there for them. And when things get tough, you're the one they look to. You're the one who has to set the example." The room fell silent as Trump's words sunk in. His tone was unwavering, his confidence contagious. "You might have the best tactics, the sharpest strategies, but if you don't have the right people following you, people who believe in what they're fighting for, you won't achieve anything," Trump said, his voice growing firmer. "Leadership is about making others better, not just telling them what to do. You have to empower them to lead as well." General Caldwell took a deep breath. The weight of leadership was something he knew intimately, but Trump's words were a reminder that true leadership wasn't just about the individual. It was about lifting everyone around you. He had spent years building trust with his soldiers, but now, he realized, there was more to it than just strategy. It was about forging a bond that transcended orders and commands. Trump's gaze softened, as if sensing the shift in the room. It's easy to lead when everything's going well. The real test of a leader comes when the odds are stacked against you, when everything is falling apart, and when others would quit. That's when you dig in and show them what you're made of. The generals nodded, their faces hardening with resolve. They were no strangers to adversity, but there was a new fire in their eyes now. Trump wasn't just giving a speech, he was instilling a philosophy, one that would echo long after the meeting ended. After a brief pause, General Caldwell stepped forward. "Mr. President," he said, his voice steady, "you've given us a lot to think about. But it's not just your words we'll take away today. It's the message behind them." Trump nodded, his expression softening. "Good. You're the ones who will lead the future of this military. Make sure you're leading from the front, and make sure your soldiers always know why they're fighting." The room fell silent once more as Trump turned to leave, but his words lingered, filling the air with a renewed sense of purpose. The generals watched him walk out, each of them contemplating the heavy responsibility of leadership. General Caldwell stood still for a moment, absorbing everything Trump had said. Then, without a word, he turned back to the room full of his officers. He knew their next mission would require more than just strategy. It would demand heart, conviction, and, above all, leadership. "You heard him," Caldwell said, his voice resolute. "We don't just lead from the front. We lead by example. And that's exactly what we'll do from here on out." The room was filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The generals knew they had a long road ahead of them, but with Trump's words in their minds, they were ready for whatever came next. The meeting ended, but the impact of Trump's speech would resonate through the ranks for years to come. It was more than just advice. It was a call to action, a challenge to redefine what it meant to be a leader in the most demanding of environments. The real work was just beginning. The days following Trump's visit to the Fort Sentinel Command Center were filled with a renewed sense of purpose. General Caldwell, reflecting on the impact of the former president's words, gathered his officers for a special debriefing session. The room was quieter than usual, a sense of anticipation in the air. The challenge had been set, and they knew that the path ahead would demand something more than their typical training. General Caldwell stood at the front of the room, his eyes scanning the faces of his officers, each one marked by years of service and sacrifice. But there was something different today, something deeper. "Men and women of Fort Sentinel," he began, his voice calm but firm. "We've all been through countless missions, countless operations. We've seen our share of victories and defeats. But what I've come to realize is that true leadership doesn't just come from the strategies we employ. It comes from the heart we put into our work, from the unwavering belief we instill in those who follow us." He paused, allowing the words to sink in. The speech we heard the other day wasn't just words. It was a challenge, and we're going to accept that challenge. There was a murmur of agreement around the room. The generals and officers present knew that the time had come for a shift, not just in how they approached their missions, but in how they led their soldiers. Over the following weeks, the impact of Trump's speech rippled through the ranks of the military. General Caldwell, inspired by the former president's call to lead by example, began holding regular leadership training sessions for his officers. It wasn't just about tactics anymore. It was about leadership development, trust building, and empowering soldiers at every level. One morning, General Caldwell gathered a select group of officers and non-commissioned officers in a large briefing room. Among them was Captain Sarah Ramirez, a rising star in the unit known for her sharp strategic mind, but also for her ability to connect with her team. "Captain Ramirez," Caldwell said, addressing her directly, "you've been a leader to your team for a while now, but I want to ask you something. What does leadership mean to you beyond the tactics and the battlefield?" Ramirez took a moment to think before answering, her voice steady. "Leadership means showing my soldiers that I'm in the trenches with them, that I'm not just issuing orders from behind a desk. It's about them knowing that I believe in them, and they can trust me, even when things seem impossible." Caldwell nodded. "Exactly. And that's what Trump was trying to tell us. Leadership is about showing the way, but also making sure that your people feel like they're part of the mission, not just following orders." In the weeks that followed, Fort Sentinel became a model for military leadership, as Caldwell's approach began to spread throughout the ranks. Officers were encouraged to take risks, to connect more deeply with their soldiers, and to focus on building trust within their units. A new ethos was born, a commitment to leadership that went beyond the battlefield, a leadership that was about shaping the future. As the training and restructuring continued, a new operation was set in motion. It was a mission that would require everything the soldiers had learned, both in strategy and in leadership. General Caldwell, now more confident in his role as a leader, prepared his team for what was to come. "I've been in this game a long time," Caldwell said during a final briefing before the operation, "but I've never faced anything like this before. We're going into unknown territory, and it's going to take every ounce of leadership we have to succeed. This is where you show your soldiers that they can trust you, that they're not in this alone. This is where we lead by example." The officers exchanged determined looks, each understanding the weight of what Caldwell had said. They were ready, not just to fight, but to lead with conviction, to embody the principles they had been taught. The mission itself was one of the most challenging Fort Sentinel had ever undertaken. The operation took the soldiers deep into enemy territory, testing their endurance, resolve, and the strength of their leadership. But, as the days passed, it became clear that the true strength of the unit wasn't just in their tactics, but in the bond they had forged, a bond rooted in trust and shared purpose. In the heat of battle, when things seemed darkest, it was General Caldwell who led the charge. His leadership was no longer just about orders. It was about inspiring his soldiers to believe in themselves, to push forward even when it seemed impossible. Captain Ramirez, who had once been a rising star, now found herself leading her own team, guiding them through the toughest moments with the confidence that had been instilled in her. The lessons learned from Caldwell and Trump's powerful speech had shaped her into a leader who could inspire and elevate others. The mission, though hard-fought, was a resounding success. Fort Sentinel had not only achieved its objectives, but it had also set a new standard for leadership in the military. General Caldwell knew that this was just the beginning, that the real work was in continuing to nurture and grow the leaders of tomorrow. As the soldiers returned to base, the impact of their success was clear. This wasn't just a victory on the battlefield. It was a victory in leadership, a victory that would echo through Fort Sentinel for years to come. General Caldwell stood on the balcony of the command center, watching his soldiers return, their heads held high. He knew that the real legacy of this mission wouldn't just be the operation itself. It would be the leadership lessons that had been passed down, the inspiration that would carry the next generation of soldiers forward. "We've only just begun," he muttered to himself, a smile creeping across his face. "Now, let's lead this military into a new era." And with that, a new chapter began. Not just for Fort Sentinel, but for every soldier who had learned the true meaning of leadership. As General Caldwell watched his soldiers return to base, heads held high with the pride of a victory well earned, he realized something profound. The mission wasn't just a success on paper. It was the embodiment of everything he'd been striving for as a leader. The real battle had been the one inside each of them, testing their trust in each other, belief in the mission, and faith in their leaders. But there was still more work to do. He turned toward the horizon, the early morning sun casting a golden hue across the landscape. The war might have been won, but the real fight, building leaders who would inspire generations to come, was just beginning. As the soldiers gathered for their final debriefing, the room was filled with a sense of camaraderie. Their journey had transformed them, not just as soldiers, but as leaders. General Caldwell stepped to the front once again, his voice steady but emotional. "We've come a long way, but it's not over," he said. "True leadership isn't just about victories. It's about what you do when no one is watching, when battles seem impossible, and when doubt creeps in. It's about empowering those around you to rise, even when they don't believe they can." The room was silent, each soldier absorbing the weight of his words. General Caldwell continued, "Each of you has proven that you have what it takes to lead. Now, take that leadership into the world. Lead by example. Be the leaders we've all been waiting for." As the briefing concluded, Caldwell watched his team disperse with a renewed sense of purpose. The military had transformed, but it was the soldiers who had undergone the most remarkable evolution. Over the months, the impact of that speech would resonate far beyond Fort Sentinel. It would spread through military bases, training centers, and leadership seminars, becoming a guiding principle of what it truly means to lead. But the question lingered, hanging like a challenge. What kind of leader would you be? Would you lead from the front? Would you inspire others to rise, to fight, and to trust in each other, even when the odds are against you? General Caldwell knew the answer. The story doesn't end here. It continues with each of us. Whether in the military or in life, leadership is about showing up, stepping up, and never backing down. It's about making those around you believe in the impossible. And as you step into your own journey, the question remains: what will your leadership legacy be? Let this be your call to action. Step forward. Lead with purpose. Lead with heart. The world needs leaders who inspire others to rise. And that begins with you. Will you accept the challenge?